Hi, this is Ms. Lauer. I'm going to be answering some questions that I have about being an educator. The first one that I have is, what are some ways that you have that you keep your students engaged when learning?
One of my favorites is called Accountable Talk, and it's where you have students participate in academic discourse about whatever the content is that we're covering that day. So, for example, they're provided with sentence stems, which are like agree, disagree, add-on, those types of stems. So, for example, I'll pose a question, or one of the students will pose a question, and these stems help them have a full class discussion where they can add on, they can disagree, they can agree. It also is a way for me to pose a question to the class, and then I'll randomize who I choose to answer the question. So let's say, for example, I pose a question, I just wait for somebody to raise their hand. Only one or two people have really had to do any thinking in that situation. Whereas if I do randomization, cold calling on them, then I can pull their name out of a set of index cards, and I can say, Kelly, what do you think? And then she'll answer. Well, nobody in the classroom knew who was going to get asked to answer that question, so everybody in the room was thinking. So that's why it's called Accountable Talk. So, say, for example, Kelly answers the question, and then I can say, well, would anybody like to add on or disagree? And then they can use their Accountable Talk stems and then, keep the discussion going.
All right, perfect. So, another one I have is, how do you connect subject matter to real life context for the kids?
One example I would use would be in a high school ELA classroom. We had reading Romeo and Juliet, and Romeo and Juliet is difficult for students. It's Old English, it's Shakespeare, it's difficult to understand, and it's not really that relevant to them, at least they don't feel like it is. And so what we did was we found a paired text where it was titled If Romeo and Juliet Had Cell Phones. So it took the same content, the same message of Romeo and Juliet in the Shakespearean version, and put it in a modern version with, texting and cell phones and things like that. And so students bought more into it and related more to that text, and helped them get the idea and the message that Romeo and Juliet was trying to share. So that's just, I think, being aware of what your students, this current generation, what they're interested in, what they currently are interested in. So, and bringing that and trying to find ways to connect it to your content.
All right. What, or do you work with, or how do you work with families to support the learning of your students?
Some ways I've done that is like a weekly or a bi-weekly newsletter. So it can either be a newsletter about what we've just done, or it can be a newsletter about what we will be doing. And that helps keep parents and families connected. So you can highlight some content or some things that you're going to be doing in the classroom, and then you can give them some things that they can do at home with their student that help connect them to the classroom and to the content that they're learning.
Okay. The next question I have is, what assessments do you use in order to gauge how a student is understanding the lesson?
I'm a big proponent of chunking the content and chunking your lesson. So depending on what the age range is, so for me, high school kids, it would be, 15 minutes-ish. So every 15 minutes we stop and we do some processing, whether that be writing, whether that be talking, whether that be having a whole group discussion, some way that they're showing me. And it could even be, multiple response systems where they put their thumbs up if they're with me, or I'm kind of fuzzy, or no, I don't get this, or yeah, I'm good, And then I do the multiple response. I do those, but I prefer for them to demonstrate some kind of writing or talking or, like an accountable talk, just class discussion, so that I can see that they're with me before we keep going.
What do you do or how do you involve your students in doing self-assessment and goal setting?
They can do, well, what we've done before is we've done where they had individual folders. They each had their own folder. And within that, they had a chart. And on that chart, it had the state standards. And then it had columns going this way. And the columns allowed them to rate themselves on their understanding of those standards. So it would be, I need to work on this. I've kind of got it. I understand it, or I could teach it to somebody else. Just four levels of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, let's say, for example, we were doing the periodic table, and they took an assessment, they did an activity, maybe we did a lab, and then they got to rate themselves based on their performance. They would go into that chart, and they would find the standard for periodic table, and then they would rate themselves. And then let's say we went to the next standard and they rated themselves low, then as a teacher, what I had in the on the side of my, lab tables over here, I would have folders that corresponded to or were connected to those standards. And then maybe during, study hall or during some downtime during class, you finished early, they could get out their folder, they could find what they had scored themselves low on. And then they could go over to that folder and practice on those things that they didn't feel as confident on, or if they had things that they scored high on, but they just wanted to be able to remember or practice, they could do that too. That was just kind of a way for them to track their own understanding.
Okay. That makes sense. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Do you collaborate with other teachers to support student learning?
Yes. We meet together daily in our PLC, which is our professional learning community. And we collaborate around best practices. We collaborate around planning our lessons. We collaborate around data that we've collected for our students. We look at student work. So, let's say for example, we all agreed to do the same activity, then I would bring samples of my student work and they would bring samples of their student work, and we would look at that and see how our students were doing and then make decisions about instruction based on that. So yes, we do. We work together daily.
Okay. Okay. What about how do you manage your professional responsibilities and as far as maintaining your motivation to want to keep teaching?
Yeah, I think it depends on your own personality, but for my personality, I'm an organized person, and so for me, I like to be good at what I do. Mm-hmm. And so for me to be good at what I do, I need to be organized and not let things slip through. So for as far as organization goes, like I have a calendar, electronic calendar, and I put due dates on there. I put systems. I put assignments or tasks that need to get done on there when they're due. Mm-hmm. And I also have a to-do list. You guys got a to-do list? Mm-hmm. That helps me just keep track of daily items and things that need to get done, whether that's, need to go to this meeting, or I need to do this in preparation for the meeting, or, that way I don't feel stressed and overwhelmed with all of the tasks that need to get done. Mm-hmm. So what I'll do is I'll organize it by due dates, and then I'll prioritize what needs to be done first, what needs to be done second, what's coming up first, and then that way, like I said, it just alleviates the stress of everything that needs to be done so that I don't get lost in all of that. And that helps me be motivated because it feels good to get those things done, cross them off the list or take them off the calendar or whatever.
Right. Okay. What about, what are various ways that you try and help prevent bullying?
I think that is, I think it starts, personally for me, I think it starts in my classroom. Everything that happens in my classroom bleeds into the hallways and bleeds into the common areas of the school. So if I establish a safe learning environment in my school, in my classroom, then the students will carry that over into the hallways. So, for example, I will establish, in our classroom, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to answer something wrong. And then we don't make fun of each other when we do those things, because we're all learning. And when I make a mistake, I'll point it out to them, say, I made a mistake, and then we move on from it and we learn from our mistakes. And so mistakes can help us, get better at things in life. And so practicing that in your classroom also helps them when they're interacting with each other outside of your classroom. And then I also think it's important for you to be on the behavior management committee, or have a connection to that, so that you will have some input into how are those situations handled on your campus.
All right. Let's see. What about establishing and articulating goals for your students and their performance?
Well, I think that goes back to goal setting for students and then managing or tracking their learning. Mm-hmm. So let's say, for example, in their folders, we say, okay, we're getting ready to start a unit on ecosystems, right? And so we can say, we can pre-assess their knowledge. We can find out what they already know and what they don't know, and they are aware of that also. So they can go in and predict, I think I'm going to do well in this area. I think I won't do well in this area, so I'm going to need to really pay attention here. And then they can set a goal. Well, I would like to, I would like for my goal to be 90%, or I would like for my goal to be this, right? And so they can do that, and in their folder where they're tracking, they can monitor that. And so they can share that with them. So they can keep that for themselves, they share it with me, and then they can also share it with their families.
Okay. How do you solve conflict between students, and when problems are when behavioral problems occur? How do you kind of solve those kind of things?
Well, I think it goes back to how you have established your classroom and what relationships you develop with your students. I think that it depends on for me, I'm of the mindset that when students have a bigger problem, it's usually because of it's a symptom of another problem, right? So, it's like when you have tooth pain. If you have tooth pain, that's because you have a bigger issue going on and you need to go to the dentist to get it fixed, right? So you can't just ignore that. So with students in my classroom, when there's a behavior problem, which isn't very often. So when there is something, if there's a behavior problem, that tells me that there's something going on with that kid. And it's my job to find out if I can do anything. Do they need to go to the counselor, or do we just need to have a conversation? Did something happen in the hall before they got here? On the way to school. So I'll usually have them step out in the hallway, and we'll have a conversation about it. Sometimes we can resolve it in the hallway. Sometimes we can say, can we put this aside until we can talk about it some more? Or do you need to go and talk to a counselor? Just being aware that behaviors don't just happen because they happen. They happen for a reason. And so what is that reason? What's the bigger issue there?
Right. Okay. Well, Thank you very much. That's all the time I